This is WAW. What a week.
What a week. Politics.
Hello. Welcome to an extraordinary edition of WOW What a Week. Today we're looking at 30 years of democratic South Africa, a Pan Africanist perspective. And he's one of my favorite Pan Africanists, he's one of my favorite human beings. Botsang Moiloa of Politics fame, which normally happens on a Saturday morning at 8, is joining us today.
Yes, Brother Fresh.
Brother
Thank
B.
you very much.
How are you doing?
And I'm doing very well, thank you.
Did you vote and how did it feel?
Hey, my brother, the queues, I actually was surprised by the turnout, in the area where I live. Normally,
Sure.
I was there like 7:05 in the morning. I had to queue for long. But it felt good. You know, I'm normally not a voter.
Yes, sir.
But I had vowed that these elections, I am going to vote.
In fact, that's one of the reasons I figured we actually need to chat to you, because generally you haven't necessarily been pro let me vote in this democracy. Why is that?
You see, Fresh, as a Pan Africanist, and your introduction comes to play.
Yes.
I don't believe in systems that were designed by the colonizers themselves.
Okay.
You know, Pan Africanism as a continental ideology has taught us that we cannot be fed by those who colonized us, who oppressed us, who dispossessed us. And if you look at democracy on its own, it was designed by the Western countries.
Sure.
Pan Africanism is democratic, and we'll get into that. It's democratic in its nature and form.
Okay.
But the systems that we are using and following as the former colonized continent in a democratic process are designed by the Western people, the same Europeans and Americans who are imperialists and colonizers and former colonizers. And for me, I don't think a person who has created my problems can be the solution to my problems. And that's why I never
But
believed
they
in...
can be. They switched off the gantries. We've had power for the last 2 months.
Yeah, purposefully so that we could vote during the course of this past week.
So the creator of the problem can be the solution.
Yeah, well, when we created our, and again, you have just said it the Pan Africanist way.
Yes.
The creator, but the current problems were created by ourselves.
Sure.
Within the 30 years of democracy, they were created by the leading ANC and other political parties in government. And in Pan Africanism, we always say African solutions for African problems. So if we created the problem, let us solve it our own way. We know that the issue of electricity is, somebody tweeted the other day laughing and saying, guys, what time is the load shedding schedule for, on Thursday? That is after the elections. but nonetheless, that's the main reason I don't believe that it is the solution. It's a system. Colonialism and apartheid were a system. They were formed in order to colonize people, to oppress people, and to misrule people.
And I think
the
also,
solution to that is also a system that has been created to channel people to go into... You still vote using a system created by the foreigners for us. You still follow the democratic process as defined by them, not defined by Africans. And people can say the monarchies were not democratic. They were very democratic. If you look at the monarchies, we didn't have to go and change the king every time or every 5 years, but they were democratic in a sense that the king or the queen of a nation will not just rule and govern with an iron fist themselves. They will have Lekota and members of the cabinet that they will consult with, and elders and advisors. Yes, of the and what they were doing it for the people. So the humanitarian element of Pan Africanism became very important in an African context. And for me, it didn't work. And you may ask me, what motivated me this year? It's the vibe. It's what is going on in the country. People have been saying to me, you talk a lot.
Are you feeling left out?
Yeah, I thought my little vote may influence. I don't think it's my one vote that counts more. It's the number of people that I could influence to go and vote. Until the night before elections, my mom was still checking with me who to vote. And I'm like, okay, if so many people can be convinced, let me also partake. And yeah.
In a nutshell, for the uninitiated, what is Pan Africanism?
Well, Fresh, simply Pan-Africanism, it's a continental ideology.
Okay.
It is, and people talk of various economic systems. They would talk of socialism and capitalism and all other systems that are available. But Pan-Africanism is not merely an economic system. It's a continental ideology that was intended, and the four leaders of Africa started with, W.E.B. Du Bois, the former African American who was, a product of slavery and led by the Sékou Touré, the former leader of Guinea-Conakry. And then it went on to grow with other leaders in the continent, like the Julius Nyerere, the Robert Sobukwe from South Africa, the Kwame Nkrumah was seen as the father of Pan-Africanism, because Ghana was the first African country to gain independence, if I put in inverted commas, and Kwame Nkrumah was the first African leader to can implement Pan-Africanism, that ideology. So I think what Pan-Africanism sought to do is to actually liberate the African person from the former colonial master teachings. Because what colonialism did, it eroded what we believed in and what we had, Ubuntu or humanity, the issue of, simple basic thing for a layman's language. You wouldn't eat in Africa while your neighbors are starving. That's where the element of Ubuntu and carry. And as I've already mentioned, how the leaders in that African continent will work for the benefit of the community or their nations.
Would you say one of the successes of the system was in demonizing some of our ways, was in dividing us, was in desecrating the family unit, such that we always operate in silos, because united as Africans or united as a community would be stronger?
Absolutely, Fresh. If you look at it, even from the colonial era, when they enslaved people, removing men and boys away from the family, what it does is it first dealt with procreation and building up and growing the number of African people, except when they wanted it to breed more slaves. But the second thing also is they brought in the religion part of it. You look at Africa, there's actually more Christian churches in Africa than any other place on earth. You understand? So they went into the religion. Then they demonized, as you correctly said, they demonized the African way of living. They even demonized the medicinal way of living, not only the religion or the African practices of whatever, whether you are a sangoma or traditional doctor, traditional healer. And I always say to people, one thing that Pan-Africanism would have done, would have shown African people that actually traditional healers, they have nothing to do with witchcraft. You understand? It's a science, it's medicine, it's science on its own. The Khoi and the San people have lived throughout the years using...
It's years of medicinal research.
Absolutely. And with proven track record.
Absolutely.
Of how it healed people. I always refer to what history has taught us to say, and they don't want to talk about it in modern day history, how the San people in the southern tip of the continent, they actually cured the Hollanders, settlers who came here suffering from scurvy and all other diseases. And it was the San people of the southern tip of Africa who cured those people with the science that they've developed over the years. Now, Pan-Africanism was intending to decolonize our minds, and that's the whole intention, to not demonize what we are, to believe in ourselves and in what we have created as African people. And they did use a tool. It was a very systematic tool to say, in handing over power or their countries back to African people, we should make sure, as former colonizers, that Africa does not implement Pan-Africanism, because what we see happening in the continent with military coups and changing and bringing more radical and more Africanized leaders, it's what the colonialists never wanted over the years, because it would have created a problem for them. You see, look at the situation whereby, and when people say we are independent, we have gained freedom, I don't like the word freedom, because we are not yet free. When your freedom was handed over to you on a silver platter, and you were told the terms and the conditions. And
you're still on a leash.
Yes.
And there's the classic, let's give them the parliament, but let's keep the banks.
Yeah,
that's actually been standard throughout every free African country. You can have your parliament, you guys can have your blue lights and live like we live, but you can't have the banks.
And when you look at what is happening in Parliament, somebody reminded me that, by the way, what do you call a group of monkeys or baboons? It's a parliament of baboons in English. That's what it's called. So that's why they continued calling Africans baboons. And they see us as that because, as you say, they are controlling us by remote control.
Sure.
From where? From New York Stock Exchange, from the London Stock Exchange.
Question. When you look throughout history, even as far back as the early 1900s, I mean, one of the founders of the ANC, and Tate Pixley,
Yes.
from as far back as the early 1900s, when he was still a student, he was already talking about how Africa needs to unite. How are we going to free ourselves from the chains of the system?
Yeah.
You look at your Marcus Garveys, your Du Bois, you look at your Nkrumahs. All of them have always consistently said, how do we liberate ourselves? How do we unite? It's 60 years later of majority of African countries becoming independent.
Yeah.
But we're still failing to unite. We're still failing to find a common cause. We're still failing to all of us say, Entlek, can you leave us to deal with our African issues the way we want to deal with them? What is the problem that we can't even unite and find a common cause?
You see, when you are produced,
Yeah.
when you are reliant on your former colonizers and the masters,
Sure.
you will never unite, because to keep us as African people divided is the common purpose. That's the only thing they are holding us on.
Sure.
Keep them divided. But also, we should look, you mentioned from the 1912s when the founder of the ANC, Pixie Isakakaseme, what happened? When
I think he famously wrote, I think he wrote a paper, I think in 1906, if I'm not
Yes,
mistaken.
before the launch
Yes.
in 1912.
Yes.
That's why I always say to people, if you read our history as South Africans very well,
Sure.
Pixley Isakakasemo was actually the real founder of the ANC.
Sure.
He just led the elders,
Yes.
who were mainly Baruti, what do you call them, the clergy people,
Clergy, yes.
to lead. And he was, but what happened to him? What happened? The colonizers then gave him a bursary to go and study abroad. You see, that is the tool they used. And our leaders were not aware that this thing of them going abroad to study in whatever university in the UK or the USA was to actually tone them down.
Sure.
Or brainwash them. And when Isaka Kaseme came back after studying, he became the leader of the ANC.
Sure.
And he could not implement the 1906 to 1908 papers that he wrote, because then he found those who were already in the country leading the African National Congress. They were already marginalized. They were divided. They were toned down. And it was a work in progress.
Sure.
They didn't stop there. That's why he was one term as the leader of the ANC, which many people regard it as a chaotic, era.
Sure.
That he led the ANC. But the colonizers and the apartheid leaders, they didn't stop there. They went on to improve their system over time. That's why when they realized that colonialism is no longer working, then they introduced the apartheid system,
Sure.
whereby they will have what they call Afrikaners and the Boers, whatever you call them, who were seen and declared to be South Africans, not as colonizers or foreign settlers, so that they can continue the system, to implement the system, but being ruled, governed, and controlled
Sure.
from the UK. And I think that's where they made sure that Pan Africanism doesn't succeed and doesn't grow. I mean, even in African countries that got independence long before South Africa, Tanzania, Zimbabwe, Ghana, and so forth, you wouldn't find Pan-Africanism being taught at schools. Me and you, we spoke about it the other time. You wouldn't find Pan-Africanism being taught at schools because it was a dangerous weapon. Remember, Pan-Africanism was supposed to be a weapon that was supposed, an antidote, if I may call it that, that was supposed to erode the creation and the mind that was created by the colonizers. It's good that me and you, we learned about Jan van Riebeeck, from school, how he supposedly arrived there as the first colonial settler. Me and you, today, we can tell the world it was not the truth. But they will give us the history that suits them, as if the colonial settlers,
Sure.
they actually developed us as Africans. They would not talk about how Africa was already developed at that time.
And in fact, going back to Kwame Nkrumah, again, as far back as the 50s, 60s, in a series of meetings of the then handful of independent African countries.
Countries, yes.
He'd always talk about we need to decolonize. We need to decolonize. It's 2024. We're still talking decolonization. What is the problem?
The problem is us, Fresh. We don't have leaders who have guts to can implement the decolonizing of the African mind.
Sure.
That's why, I looked at my son who's young, was home this week, and I looked at, he was writing an Afrikaans exam, that's his second language. And I asked him, I said, why did I, as a Pan Africanist, allow my child to go and study English as the first language and Afrikaans as the second language? We didn't have the choice, me and you. But why would it now in democracy in South Africa, do we still allow people to go and study Afrikaans? What is it that a child can do with Afrikaans that they can't do with Setswana or isiZulu or Xhosa? You understand? Why do we allow that? Why do we allow that there's still predominantly colonial languages universities? Only now the government in South Africa has introduced a policy to say they will start rolling out a policy which will start teaching math, science, and other languages with African languages. Something that the 1976 generation fought for.
You'd have thought that the minute 94 happened,
76 would have been implemented.
that the first thing you do is say, okay, guys, how do we take back our power? How do we take back our identity? How do we reassert ourselves as Black Africans?
Fresh, you are 100% right. And that's what you see, like I said, we were given this freedom and this independence, and we were told the conditions. The negotiated political settlements.
Are you saying it was too negotiated?
It was, look, I've heard ANC leaders, many of them saying, we actually went out of the negotiating table empty-handed.
True.
You understand? And literally, when you look at, that's why the ANC struggled to turn around the lives of Black or African people in South Africa. It is because they gave too much at the negotiated table. And you are mentioning important things. If we would have went for the culture, for the religion, for the language, basics, only those who would have turned this country and this continent, and not only in South Africa, throughout the whole continent.
And we've had an opportunity in 30 years to learn from the Afrikaner community. The way they passionately fight just for their language and their culture.
Yes.
If we are not learning from seeing them fighting passionately for their own culture, then who are we that we don't see the value that they see?
Yes. Because they know that their lives is enshrined in their culture and language. But again, it is also because they know it will protect what they have created. It will protect their wealth. It will protect their businesses. We see, me and you today, we still call that sausage with bread boerewors roll. You understand? We if you look at the more people who consume boerewors rolls in South Africa are Black people, not because they're in majority.
Sure.
Not because they're in majority. Everybody who has access to that. We still do. People still call a pot of food Portuguese.
Sure.
Instead of us implementing ours, we actually adopted the African culture and way of doing things.
In fact, a lot of township slang is basically just Afrikaans.
Yeah, no, slang is Afrikaans. and first, I think that South Africa is going into a seventh administration.
Sure.
I think if we can have political leaders who are young and who will see where our elders have made mistakes. They've done their part. And I think also in South Africa, I think it was also demonizing the Pan Africanist Congress of Azania. And I always say to people, there's a Pan Africanist Congress of Ghana, of Zimbabwe, of Zambia, and of Azania, meaning in South Africa. Now, once you start talking Pan Africanism, there is still people who are delusioned to think when you talk Pan Africanism, you are talking a political party, the PAC.
Oh, yes.
Understand? And that's also the other problem. They've created an impression that anything that has Africanism in it, it means belonging to an Africanist, Congress or political party.
Or it means, therefore, we hate white people.
Exactly.
It's similar to Black consciousness.
It's the same as Black consciousness.
Black consciousness has been demonized because all I'm saying is I am Black and I am proud of who I am. But others want to now have disinformation that says, I hate white people or I hate brown people.
I have in my life simplified it. I've got a quote even in my biography that many people didn't like when I said, I am so black and I love black people so much
Yeah.
that I have no room. I love black 100%, that I have no room to love other people.
Sure.
But that does not mean I hate them.
Exactly.
It means I love my people and myself
I'm
and
so
my culture.
self-aware.
I'm so self-aware. And that's the impression to say, oh, once you start talking Pan-Africanism or black consciousness, you want to throw white people into the sea. You want to take everything that they own, that they've worked for. And because black consciousness and Pan-Africanism, they always talk of the land. And why land, again, why is it such a sensitive thing that when Africans talk about land ownership, it is so sensitive that it even rattles our own African people who are landless like us, as if land ownership is a sin, as if it is exclusive to a certain population, whether they are white or whether they are rich, because that's another thing. Rich people can buy land. They can own land and they still buy it from white people who acquired it, in a colonial way. I had a friend talk with a friend this past week, just before the elections, to say these people, they will even, the white people, when I say this, I'm talking about white people who are anti-Pan-Africanism and anti-Africanism, they say they want to live with us and we shouldn't blame them for the sins of their forefathers. And I always raise a question. If your great-grandfather stole land from my great-grandfather, it's not you who stole, I understand. But you are sitting with the proceeds and the benefits of that land, of that theft, of that murder, of that slavery. You are sitting with the proceeds. If they were genuine, they will say, this ill-gotten.
How do we find a middle ground?
How do you find a middle ground?
Where we both win.
Yes, where we both win, where we both share equally,
Because I don't think anyone is saying, give me the land and jump into the ocean.
No, nobody.
How can we coexist?
And that's why Pan-Africanism talks of equal distribution of the land for those who work the land. Even the ANC's Freedom Charter has taken that leap from Pan-Africanism. But the land ownership, again, Fresh, we have used simple examples. If I steal your car and I paint it, and I put more big tires and all that, and I change its number plate illegally, and you bump on me after a year using that vehicle, it is still your vehicle, it's stolen. The fact that I have improved its service, it changed the paint and the tires, does not make it my vehicle. And also, when people say white people or colonial settlers in South Africa, in Africa general, they developed and improved this country. Where? How? With whose labor? With whose skills?
Whose cheap labor, whose blood?
Whose
sweat?
blood, yes. You understand? So Pan-Africanism wanted to erode the issue of we are not equal even in the workforce. You go to supermarkets, simple basic thing. You go to supermarkets, you find people with a BCom degrees being cashiers and tellers just because they studied commerce. And you find a white son or boy who is standard 8 or only matric is their manager and supervisor. And those are some of the things that Pan-Africanism is supposed to teach those kids who are tellers in supermarkets to say, but you must rebel and revolt, to say, but I've got qualifications. And again, I was talking about the medicine issue. These days I see when everybody's sick, everybody's now talking, go and get some ginger, go and get some turmeric, go and get some garlic, put boiling water. I live with that, and that's why I never get sick. And when Africans wanted to do that, the colonialists came and said, no, but that's very bad. That is what it didn't go through the laboratory. It's not packaged and all those things. Look at what companies have done in Africa, like Pfizer and all others during the COVID-19. Almost everybody who took the COVID-19 shot is sick today. And they are coming back and say, yes, we lied to the world. And if we were Africanized very well in the continent, would have not accepted that Africa became in the dumping ground of these, toxic medicines that they dumped on us. But just to put, again, we need to develop leaders who know and understand what Pan-Africanism is. And once our leaders, they will be unable to put programs and systems that will roll out Pan-Africanism in our countries.
Some would argue that the PAC has pretty much disappeared into obscurity. What went wrong with the PAC?
I'm one of the people, and having been a child of the PAC, I'm one of the people who think it has disappeared, and I'm one of the people who think, when the results of these elections come out, the PAC may disappear.
Sure.
One, it was the creation of the colonialists and the former apartheid imperialists. Remember, they jumped into the bandwagon of the negotiated political settlement, and also they were marginalized. Which imperialists? If you look at how capitalists and imperialists and funders of political parties are funding even upcoming political. Why wouldn't they fund the PAC? You understand? So they are very clear with their agenda to say you need money and material to can run an election process. But this hardcore Pan-Africanists who wants to implement Pan-Africanism in the continent, we're not going to fund them. And you cannot contest elections if you are not funded, if you don't have the material and the means to can run for the elections. But again, it's the system. The system is designed in such a way that anything that mentions Sobukwe, Pan-Africanism and everything, it's nowhere else to be heard as seen of or being taught even at school. You go to libraries, very difficult. I know only the Wits library in South Africa has the whole material of Sobukwe. But again, it's to silence, and we don't have to rely on Sobukwe. There were other leaders after Sobukwe, but they were also marginalized and silenced. Sure. And that's what was difficult with the PAC. And I think what the Pan-Africanist Congress of Azania should do is to go and become a think tank, to go and become an organization that informs the people on the ground and forget wasting resources and time on trying to contest election, thinking they will implement Pan-Africanism in parliament. You can't implement Pan-Africanism in a parliament that is a colonial parliament. You understand? When people grow and outgrow colonialism and cleanse their minds, those are the people who will say, we will put leaders in parliament who will erode the system of the colonial masters. But you can't do it the other way around. Parliament is created by the capitalists and the imperialists. They fund it, they fund the government, they own the economy and the means of production. Sure. You can't expect those people now to come and fund something that is going to take away from them. And I think that's where the problem is. I think they should come to realize that we live in the supposed to be democratic societies, and living in those societies, money and material controls. Now you come with a Pan-Africanist manifesto to say, I want to repossess the land, the minerals, the mines, the oceans and the seas. I want to repossess them. You're taking away what the imperialists and the capitalists have. The former colonizers, they're still holding on to Africa because of those minerals, because of the land and its, its minerals and God-given natural resources. Now, if you want to take away from them, you will see what's going to happen in the next 5 to 10 years, that how imperialists and foreigners are going to own the sun. Sure. They're going to own the sun in Africa in order to, for the solar system, for the energy system, the wind, those wind generating, windmills generating energy. It's naturally to wind. They're going to start owning that. Sure. And somebody will say, how will they own the sun? The same way they own the ocean. The same way they own the rivers. Understand? They'll find a way. They'll find a way of doing it. I mean, you have people who are having fishing rights and they can fish up to a certain kilometer radius into the ocean. And they own that. And how did they measure that? How did they cut the ocean to say, INJ will fish to this extent? The exact same way that they met at some stage and decided how Africa was going to be divided. Yes, the Berlin meeting. That Italy, good luck, but go try the East, the Horn there. We'll squeeze you somewhere up there. Portugal, go try there. England, you can have there. Leopold, you can have the center of Africa. And ask yourself why African leaders do not meet. I mean, the OAU was formed. It changed the name to the African Union. Why wouldn't they meet and come with a collective position to say we are pushing these people out of our continent? We will trade amongst ourselves. Sure. We'll produce for ourselves and all that. And imagine African leaders can't do that. Forget AU. Look at SADC. Yeah. Look at the 13 to 15 member states. It's 15, but 13 are inland member states of SADC countries. They can unite and come with common cause. They're simple. Is there anything, though, over the last 30 years of democracy in South Africa that you feel aligns with Pan-Africanist principles? Look, there's quite a few things. There's changes in the recent years. There's changes with with the coming up of, Pan Africanist Black consciousness, small, formations like the Black First, Land First, the EFF, it has awakened the people to some extent.
Sure.
That people are starting to ask important questions, especially the youth. They're starting to ask relevant and important questions, and I think there is hope. I'm not giving up to say there is hope. It may not happen in my lifetime, but the current generation, I listen to youth talking, I listen to them debating and engaging us as parents on why is this happening, why is this not happening. I mean, at some stage, my son, who is now 21, at that time he was like 14, he asked me a very pertinent question to say, but why is Granny sitting at home and still struggling to work when white grannies are having tea and coffee around Centurion where we live? And I had to explain to him actually that the system has created it that way. They had benefits, they had jobs, and they could save and invest, and they had a system that protected them. But with this, awake generation, I think they will be able to push Pan-Africanism, but it's going to come out of individuals. It's going to come out of us as parents, families, start speaking our home languages, start teaching our children our own culture and way of living and traditions. That may improve the situation.
Now you are because I'm not going to say you are a former diplomat, because a diplomat is a diplomat is a diplomat.
Yeah. Yes.
Is there anything about South Africa's foreign policy that you feel aligns with Pan-Africanist principles? Whether it's how South Africa relates to other African countries or with the global north, as it were?
Fresh, very little. I've been in the diplomatic community or cycle. I served for 13 years of that, and I've been there for all my adult life. Very little on the policy that talks of Pan-Africanism as a continental ideology. Yes, South Africa has good relations with almost all African states, but that's common cause. That's normal. I don't see the South African foreign policy pushing for a Pan-Africanist way of relating in Africa. Yes, we may be part of the African free trade, but it's all the market-related issues about how they trade, but how to relate and how we can exchange our cultural values and norms and trading amongst ourselves primarily. Look, we are members of BRICS now. We have agreed to trade amongst BRICS member states. We may even go through a BRICS currency, but we failed to have a common currency for SACU. Botswana pulled out. You understand? We failed to have a common currency for SADC. So our foreign policy is not an Africanized policy, sadly so. And I think there's more we can do. And look, the world has evolved as well. We have a situation whereby there's trading. We can't ignore foreign trade or trade with other, global north or the east. We can't ignore that. But we should do it. We should have had policies that will allow us in Africa to trade with those trading partners as a collective, as a group and a platform. If you look at how the Americans, especially Latin America, trade with other countries. They trade collectively. If you look at the Asian, that's why they're called Asian tigers and so forth. If you look at how Asia trades with the world, they first trade among themselves. Then when they approach the world, they approach them as a collective. And our policy is failing to bring that kind of collectiveness.
And we're 1 billion strong.
Way. I mean, Africa can feed itself, and with change we can feed the world. But we must repossess Africa first. We must get the countries of Africa being owned and controlled by African people.
I like how you speak about we can't even have a common currency, in the SADC subcontinent. And again, it brings me back to one of my favorite Africans, Kwame Nkrumah.
Yes.
Who as far back as 60, 70 years ago was saying, we need one army.
Yeah.
We need one currency.
We need one currency.
Can we work towards that? This was 60, 70 years ago.
Yeah, but the divide and rule comes in. The traitors were there. He gets killed. And everybody else that followed him who wanted to do it gets killed or assassinated or isolated. If you look at Patrice Lumumba, if you look at Thomas Sankara, everybody else that wanted to implement what Kwame Nkrumah, I mean, if you recall that Kwame Nkrumah was actually toppled from power when he was not even at home.
Exactly.
You understand?
Yeah.
So the system that went, but also it's having traitors amongst African people. It's having people who in this time age, me and you have been praising the current president of Kenya,
Ruto.
Ruto.
Yeah.
Ruto in the last 3 months has somersaulted. He's not the Pan Africanist guy.
Now he's private jetting.
He's private
to
jetting,
America.
yes. And he's talking a totally different language. And you ask yourself, how much money is enough? How much is it enough for these people? I mean, as a Pan Africanist, I'm a Sankarist by nature.
Sure.
But we all know if you become like a Thomas Sankara, you will be taken down. And it's happening. They don't shoot and kill them like they do. They assassinate them differently, poisoning, you understand? And marginalizing those who don't die like Mugabe. You marginalize, they put you on what we call it, sanctions, economic sanctions and embargo to squeeze you so that your own people will end up hating you. Your own people will end up seeing you as the enemy of progress and development. Look at what they did to Colonel Gaddafi. I mean, the Libyans were made. Gaddafi was an absolute Pan-Africanist. Understand? And he implemented it. We saw how he turned that desert country into a self-sufficient country, even funded other African countries. What did the imperialists do?
And without fail, like Nkrumah, he was always about, guys, can we get going? Guys, can we unite? Guys, can we get going?
Gaddafi was even 50 years ahead. He even said, if we can have one currency, let's trade with commodities that we possess.
Exactly.
I'll trade with oil, you trade with gold and diamond. He was very creative and practical. What happened? The imperialists went and they told the Libyans to say, this guy, he's a dictator, he's very bad for you. And they took him out. Libyans killed Gaddafi.
He was lynched by his own people.
His own people. And look at what is happening in Libya today. These are some of the things that we should educate people and guard against. But look, I was born a Pan Africanist. I'll probably die a Pan Africanist. Nothing will change that. And the love, if we can teach our people, and that's where Black consciousness comes in, and they work well hand in hand, glove in hand with Pan Africanism. We must have love for our own self, our own people. Ubuntu, this thing must not just sing and make noise about Ubuntu, but to be able to care for somebody else. You understand? And I mean, I look at what is happening in the elections in South Africa. The rich politicians in big SUVs going into, squatter camps. And I don't see love between that politician and those people, except that they want your vote during elections.
Speaking of Ubuntu, as much as it's a superpower, as some would like to think it is, don't you think it is sometimes to our own detriment that we view the world from an Ubuntu filter, that it almost gets in the way of us asserting ourselves, of us saying enough is enough, of us saying, okay, yes, I'm a nice guy, but okay, this is where I draw the line now.
We should be able to draw a line, but it starts at home. It must start with us. When people speak of Ubuntu, I'm not talking about, as a Pan Africanist, welcoming everybody from China, Asia, and wherever in Europe, and say because of Ubuntu I'm welcoming them. We saw what it did to us. They colonized us. Understand? They made us raped and enslaved us. I'm talking about Ubuntu as African people, and I'm keeping it purely, solely in the Africanist context to say, let it start with us as Africans before we can extend the leaf to other nations. And let's perfect it amongst ourselves. And we are failing to do that. Look at the lifestyle in townships or in rural areas. Some extent in rural areas, they still maintain it. But you find people, the urbanization as well has created a problem with that. The caring and the protection of each other. And we don't have that. That's why, Black consciousness leaders in South Africa like they will say, if you find a black person and a white person fighting, you must help the black person first and ask questions after. For me, that is Ubuntu. Not to say you are violent or you hate, but you are saying, but this is my brother, this is what comes first. When you say help, it may mean save him or protect him. It does not mean beat the other one. And this is the kind of language we must teach the people. But for me, Ubuntu, it means me and you, we must care each other. We must work together for the development of even our neighbors, our children, and everybody else around us. But inequality also in a society. South Africa is one of the most unequal. And actually, even if you look at Africa, but South Africa is the most unequal society on earth. And how do we live in a situation whereby I sleep on an empty stomach and you've got food that you give to dogs and you throw away? Some of the challenges we are sitting with. We have had one of the political parties in South Africa spending millions of rands to save the rhino while the people of Khayelitsha were sleeping on the street and eating from dustbins. I don't say rhinos must not be saved,
Sure.
but I'm saying where is the element of Ubuntu there?
I always say that it's criminal that countries like South Africa, the DRC, Nigeria, Botswana, Angola have all the mineral wealth that they do, but you have people hungry. It's criminal.
When you combine them, those countries you have mentioned, they are mineral wealth. More than 83% of the world's mineral wealth come from those African countries you have mentioned.
People are hungry.
In those countries, people are more hungry than any other place on earth.
I mean, I was looking at, for instance, President Masisi in Botswana arguing that we would like a larger cut of the money you guys are making from our diamonds.
Yes.
And that had to be a whole negotiation.
Yes.
It's our diamonds. But you want to take so much percentage of our diamonds. And you want us to negotiate.
Yes. And why do you still say put percentages on it? You should be able to
our
say
diamonds.
With our diamonds we'll give you a certain percentage.
And you'd think that would inspire other African leaders to actually say, guys, can we all meet? Can we all meet?
And discuss
and
this.
Come with a common, okay, guys, these are our minerals that belong to our people. You have people who live in villages and squatter camps around mines because there's zero beneficiation.
Exactly. And again, this is where Pan Africanism comes in fresh. You just said, imagine if the leaders of these countries meet, especially where there's stability,
yes,
like South Africa and Botswana.
Yeah.
We have seen the leader of, what is this country, Burkina Faso,
sure,
the current leader of Burkina Faso. He has started that process of saying, I'm taking all the minerals. Anybody who wants this will come and talk to us and to plow back into our community or the society or the nation. But why would African leaders not sit around the table? And that should be their agenda.
Yes.
That should be their agenda to say, how are we amassing our mineral to keep it at home or to dictate to the world how these minerals will be sold, at what cost, and in our terms and conditions. No, they will not. They will instead go and meet the Americans and the Chinese and everybody else except amongst themselves. There's no Ubuntu there. When they meet, when the AU meet, they meet to talk about the wars in Sudan. The wars anyway. Very little they will talk about the trade. Trade what? To use South African borders and other countries that has the sea borders to can have what? Goods that comes from Asia and the West. How these goods can move freely and cheaply in Africa. They don't talk about unfinished goods, the diamonds and everything to move in Africa. They talk about finished products. How we can get South African products all over Africa, finished products. But when you talk of the minerals, nobody's talking about that.
Absolutely.
And I think that's some of the challenges we are faced with. But look, it's channels and platforms like this where people should look at what can we do for Pan-Africanism, a continental ideology, as it was envisaged by the Kwame Nkrumahs of this world. What can we do moving the continent forward? And I think it will also aid us politically.
In closing, because we could have this conversation until Jesus returns, how can the younger generation in South Africa and Africa at large, how can they move Pan-Africanism forward, make it cool even, and keep it top of mind? How would you envisage that happening?
First, you mentioned what the youngsters will like, keep it cool. We can, people are having apps. We can use electronics and apps. That issue that the former COO of SABC had, the content of saying, let our television and radios play content, local content, and real Africanized content. But also, I think South Africa, for example, is talking about changing the education curriculum and system. I think we should push as a nation and ask our kids to push at school, let their voices be heard to school governing bodies that Pan-Africanism, why are people being taught socialism, capitalism, and communism and everything else and democracy in the textbooks of either history, economics, or social science, any social science, but they are not being taught Pan-Africanism. I think introducing Pan-Africanism as a compulsory subject in the curriculum of schools around Africa, not only in South Africa, it will aid, because then it will awaken these kids to start saying, but why is democracy and socialism and communism being pushed through our throats when we have our own continental ideology? Introduce it at school, introduce it in the mainstream media, and also bring back the civil society organizations where people will start practicing the norms and cultures of the African people. You know, I miss the days where my grandfather used to make fire outside and he would sit and he will tell us all those stories and all those things. And for me, that's some of the things that conscientized me. Because I had an opportunity to sit with the old men, and from both sides, both maternal and to sit with them and be taught and be told how things are done traditionally. And for example, this thing of taking kids at that age is very important, the initiation schools, because boys go to initiation schools at around the age of puberty, 12. That's an opportunity to say, when they are there, introduce not only the sexual lessons as well as the foreskin cutting, introduce the African, how to protect, how to hunt, how to take care of the family. White people are using hunting as a sport. You understand? They collect guns to go and hunt animals as trophies. We should go back and teach our kids that we used to have hunting in order to feed families for those who have an opportunity to do that. I mean, I was saying to my son the other day, I can tell you are hungry, I can take you to a river to catch a fish and clean it and braid it. You will starve while the fish is in the river.
Exactly.
And those are some of the things we should be doing. Introduce the education. And education is not only formal. I've mentioned the formality type of school. I've mentioned the media. I've mentioned the initiation schools and us as families. And I think that's how we can carry it forward.
You know, I look forward to my kids being able to be taught in whatever language they speak at home. I look forward to a time that happens.
Yeah.
I look forward to a time where African history is compulsory throughout your schooling career.
Exactly.
I look forward to, similar to what happens with Boy Scouts. Have we lost power, or should we keep talking? Welcome to the Dark Continent. We're talking Pan Africanism. This is actually very poetic.
Is this the first sign? Is this the first sign of load shedding coming back?
No, this is the Dark Continent. We're Africa. So, yeah, but I think we should carry on.
But you know, mentioning the Dark Continent, Fresh. Again, remember, darkness was seen as a taboo, as a very bad thing. It's dark. That's why things are not moving. That's why there's no progress. I don't know why do we still have to refer to Africa as the Dark Continent when it has so many beautiful, bright colors and people. But I think it also works a little bit in the mind. When people think of Africa, they think of a dark continent, and darkness in a sense that it's not dark because of the melanin that me and you have, but it's dark because there's no progress. You know, as the former American president called it, a shithole at some stage. And we allow that because we create an impression that we can't do anything. But for me, it's about leadership. And if we don't groom and train the kids of today from very, very, elementary childhood on Pan-Africanism, then we won't achieve this. And South Africa can start. We have an opportunity now. We are going into a new administration. And as much as we were, pardon me, the one of the last countries to be liberated or to gain independence in Africa, I think South Africa is well positioned to can influence politics in the continent. And we saw how Thabo Mbeki influenced politics regarding the African Renaissance, NEPAD and all that. But you know what happened? Again, and this is modern. We don't talk now the old history of the Kwame Nkrumahs. As recent as the 2000s, under Thabo Mbeki, the former president of Nigeria and others who tried to bring the NEPAD thing, it was Pan-Africanism talking. They were trying to bring Pan-Africanism and the in a modernized way, in a modern day way. And again, what happened to NEPAD? What happened to that whole African Renaissance process? The imperialists came, they divided them. They divided them, they removed some in power. This regime change, it's real. It's very real to have a regime change. When you have a leader that is trying to push a certain narrative that the former colonizers and the West doesn't like, they will remove that person. Even if they don't assassinate that person, they will cause chaos in a country. But once our people are conscientized, once our people know that the power is in their hands and not only the voting power. This thing of people saying the power is in your hand, go and vote. You vote once in 5 years, what power do you possess? And for the duration of the 5 years, again, this is where democracy is wrong. This is why I prefer Pan Africanism. For the duration of 5 years, even if you are misled,
You're stuck.
you are stuck. Why should I wait for another 5 years to can remove people out of power? When our people, we must have a system whereby if we put leaders there and they are not delivering what we want at a given period,
Sure.
not at a period that is determined by them, we can remove them. We don't have to wait for 5 years to go and vote. And then we vote and they still dictate the votes. They still dictate how the votes will be counted, how you vote. They tell you how you will vote, where you will vote, and how what is the outcome. They tell you.
Sure.
You don't determine. So that's why I'm saying that system vis-a-vis Pan-Africanism, I would rather have the old school Pan-Africanism. And you can modernize it. We have technology these days. Pan-Africanism, it talks of Ubuntu, which is humanity. On its own, Pan-Africanism is a socialist. It's socialist in its format, where the state owns the resources on behalf of the nation, controls, owns, and manages on behalf
For the benefit of
the people. Yes,
absolutely.
And we don't have that situation. I mean, you mentioned people in mining towns. Look at Rustenburg. Look at all, Brett. Look at all the mining towns that produces billions, if not trillions of dollars.
The fact that a place had to be named Marikana, which means a place of squalor.
Squalor, yes.
Why is people living in squalor when there's billions of dollars of minerals under the ground that they live?
Yeah,
it doesn't make sense.
It doesn't, Fresh. And I think this is the language that politicians who are sitting, but they must start talking that language.
Sure.
Making laws and saying you must plow back into the community and this mining company doesn't plow back and they get away with it. It doesn't help us. You understand? We can make all these beautiful and wonderful policies. If they do not translate into the well-being of citizens, then we must forget.
Brother B, like I said, me and you could speak until Kwame Nkrumah comes back, or Marcus Garvey, or Du Bois. But
any of them, yes.
Dubois. But yeah, man, thank you for an interesting perspective.
No, thanks, my brother. And
30 years of democracy, a Pan Africanist perspective.
I'm sitting on the chairs of celebrities. Am I getting into that role? Because normally this segment it's for celebrities. But yeah, no, thanks very much for the opportunity.
Yes, sir.
And it has been a pleasure. You actually had my mind running amok, when you mentioned Pan Africanism. But like I said, I don't have to go and read about that. I've lived as a Pan-Africanist all my life.
Absolutely.
And I wish it could happen before I leave this world and depart a few steps ahead. And that will please me. Not elections and democracy.
My challenge to you at home is to Pan-Africanize your household. We're not saying turn... all of a sudden, turn your back on whatever it is you believe in.
Yes.
But the sooner we can remind our kids to love themselves as they are, as Africans, to be proud of our belief systems, the way we do things, to realize that Mogodu Monday is actually a problem. Because why are we celebrating Mogodu Monday?
Exactly.
This is food we eat every day. We should be having Pizza Thursday, rather, because we eat Mogodu every day.
And there's nothing African about Mogodu.
You know what I mean? So the fact that we have things like that, where people only dress up because they're going to a wedding. People only dress up because it's a heritage day.
It's a heritage day.
You should be dressing like that every day. You go to West Africa and that's all you see. You see West Africans dressed in what is that traditional garb, because that is the way of life.
A few days ago, it was Africa Day.
Exactly.
We didn't see anybody. We only saw a few people dressing
at work.
You understand?
And I think the sooner we can turn our Africanness into what it should have been from as far back as 100 years ago, how you live, it's who you are. It's not a fancy dress party. It's not Halloween where we're going to dress up now. Let's now dress up because the boss said it's Africa Day, we must come wearing our Xhosa or Tswana or Zulu outfits. That's rubbish. This is who we are, guys. Let's be proud of who we are and let's live who we are. We're Africans.
Thanks, my brother.
Yes, sir.
I hope they've heard you.
I hope so. And if they haven't, we will keep shouting from the hilltops until they make us disappear. But until then, it's worth the fight. We are part of the Africa Podcast Network. Thank you for tuning in, coming to you from Discover TV. Look them up. They've got an incredible studio set up. Whatever you're trying to film, whether you've got a TV show going, Discover TV will look after you. And you can find us on all social media. Wow, what a week. Shout out to Trevor and his team at Pezulu Works for the cinematography. We look good because of Trevor. If we don't look good, it's because of Trevor. And also shout out to Otis the Flo Fraser for all of our imaging, our producers, Kuvesh Mohan and Kileso Mudisa King. If you'd like to email us, it's waw@africapodcastnetwork.com. By the time you view this, we'll still be waiting for the results. So hopefully your party is doing better than you anticipated. Till next week, have a wow African week in spite of yourselves.